So years ago, I saw a line in a psych textbook that captured my attention. It said, "At this stage in his development, a 4-year-old child may see the leaves moving, but misunderstand causation. He may think that the leaves moving cause the wind to blow." And I'm a visual person, but I was like, that's kind of cool and charming, right? But you know what's not so charming? When we think that black teenagers are thugs causing white policemen to kill them, or that women gamers who speak up against objectification are causing men to dox them and threaten to rape and kill them, or when we think that the president is Satan and causing mass shootings because he's endangering our guns. You know, with children, we see something like, oh, the leaves moving causes the wind to blow as a natural but primitive understanding of the world. In the case of grown-ups and the internet, I'm not sure we're growing out of it. I kind of think we're making it worse. So I have to say, thank you, as she said, algorithms. You can now live your whole life without actually seeing a different opinion or face. And even though the Earth thrived for 4.5 billion-ish years on biodiversity, we've created 7 billion microcultures, microclimates, monocultures, where we host only our most comfortable opinions and news. We don't have any challenges to what we're thinking if we don't want them. Now, the problem is it's not healthy, right? Even if you were eating only vegetables, it's still not healthy. And in the case of the internet, it doesn't matter whether it's horrifying poison or all happy news. We need more stuff. Now, every day, we get images that are tempting us to click, right? They're precisely aimed at the intersection of our fears, our experience, and our innate curiosity. We want to look just beyond what we know to be true in our real life. That's what they feed off. In fact, it's kind of great and perfect that they're called our social feeds because it's what we're living on. But how do we know? How do we know when we are tempted to click what's really going to happen? Long before brain research actually proved that we have a tendency towards negative bias, the writer Joseph Conrad called it the fascination of the abomination. And it is our inability to look away from disasters of body, of morals, of pity. It's also our ability to feel strangely comforted when something awful happens to someone else. The thing is, how do we know when something's real? How do we know what's true? And even in the cases of the most crazy things, somewhere in our deepest fears we think, oh, I wonder. Have you ever seen something that you're like, well, that's so crazy? No one believes that. Now, these are 2 Facebook friends of mine who posted really about the same topic within a few days of each other. And the point is, you're getting your news from wherever you're getting your news, and it becomes its own little ecosystem, its own microculture. And when that happens, what does it do to how we view the rest of the world? And now you guys are all marketers, you say, well, that's SEO. I mean, that's just inbound marketing. Everybody knows that, right? But the thing is, does everybody really know it? Can you find the truth if it's not trending? I mean, you can, as long as it's not on page 10 of your Google results. Because it's on page 10, if it's on page 10, then is it really relevant? Well, so it's a good question. In 2014, Rachel Levy wrote a story about Tyrone Hayes. He was a Harvard and Berkeley trained scientist who published in peer-reviewed journals some kind of worrisome findings. I'll just call them nasty findings about a pesticide named atrazine. And shortly after he published them, he noticed that suddenly articles were popping up calling him a fake or a fraud. Then he wondered publicly whether maybe the company might be trying to discredit his work, and more articles popped up calling him a paranoid narcissist for even being so delusional to think that a giant chemical company would care about his little studies. Luckily for Tyrone Hayes, well, unluckily for a town, they decided to sue the company because they were starting to have some worrisome results in their own population. But luckily for Tyrone Hayes, their class action lawsuit released thousands of internal company memos. And in this beautiful feminine handwriting, discredit Hayes. This was from a meeting. These are minutes from a meeting. Discredit Hayes, complete frog studies, you know. And I know. And all of a sudden, he's not so paranoid, right? But were it not for the lawsuit, we would never have known. And I'm a huge fan of Rachel Levy's work in general. But in that multi-thousand-word article, this sentence blew my mind. The PR team suggested that the company purchase Tyrone Hayes as a search word on the internet, so that anytime someone searches for Tyrone's material, the first thing they see is our material. And you know, I searched on it, and I found Tyrone Hayes not credible. So it begs the question, what do we want to find? What do we believe? I'm sorry about this, but last year you know how the Facebook feed, you see something out of the corner of your eye and you're like, huh? Again, innate curiosity, darkest fears. I clicked, I was so sorry, but this article pops up. Obama plans to import Ebola-infected foreigners from other countries. This was during the Honduran refugee crisis. And the article went on to say that the president was planning to bring children purposely infected with Ebola to our shores as part of a plan to bring down white patriots. And, right? And some of the commenters, one of them actually mused that this being the case, we would be perfectly within our rights to shoot those children if we saw them. Well, actually, I want to give you one more example. Just last month, a Texas congressman opined that the war against ISIS was just a ruse to hide the president's real plan of starting World War III and bringing out the end of Israel. Now, the point is not that, or not just that, neither of those things happened. Nobody has Ebola from refugee children. The point is that this post was shared 10,000 times in its first month alone. And on YouTube, probably, I think it was over 100,000 times. These are things that are finding the voids in people's personal experience and their fears and hitting them exactly where they need to be. And it doesn't matter. You know why? No one disagrees with us because we're right. And the proof that we're right is no one disagrees with us. We can now be righteously confirmed in our worst fears. We can now be segregated by our likes. No, actually, scratch that. We're segregated by our hatreds, by actually our not best selves. And sadly, this is what we built for ourselves. You know, in theory, a recommendation engine and an algorithm works the way it should. You like something, you click on it, you get more of what you liked, right? But But the way the news business has evolved, and speaking as a former journalist, and I'm sure there are many here also, now in an editorial, at an editor's desk or terminal probably now, they're in the position of supporting their staff based on your clicks, right? And they don't know very much about their audience, but they know that you, if you like these kinds of headlines, not these kinds of headlines. So it just becomes its own ecosystem. And even though news used to travel very slowly, events were reported and disseminated and analyzed, and at some point became our shared history until, and you know, even then we can still reframe them when we get new information. It doesn't work that way anymore. We're buried under an avalanche of images and news, and there's so much to know and so much to click on, and we know everything for at least a second or two. I mean, really, does anybody even remember that we had Honduran refugee children? A crisis? Ebola? Anyone? Anyone? No? No. The tricky thing is, even though this mechanism evolved to make news profitable and pay reporters and supposedly get at the truth, what it's really doing is just giving this information about us. We think we're making judgments. Machines are actually making judgments about us. And as an aside here, if you knew how much money they get for your data, if you knew how much money they get from what you do, you probably wouldn't give it away for free. But even though we think we're making judgments, we're making likes, we're showing people what we care about, we're proud of it, actually, our clicks help machines make judgments about us. And they don't know, machines don't know if you said your prayers every night. They don't know if you were raised to be kind. But they do know that you clicked on that picture of kids riding in Ferguson, but not on the picture of kids a few blocks away trying to protect a store from being looted. Now, I know this sounds all abstract, but my point is it has actually really big real-life consequences. The writer Claire Kane Miller pulled together a bunch of studies that showed that our supposedly unbiased algorithms that we use for search engines, for hiring, for everything really, are actually biased because they were built by human beings. This is just one snippet. I urge you to go find it yourself. Read the whole article. Now, this is deeply personal to me, and here's why. Look at this picture. Tell me what you see. See a black woman, defiant, unsmiling. What if I tell you that if we measure our friends by the influence they have on the person we become, she was the best friend I ever had, or one of them. I am the woman I am today because of her. She taught me that I could have opinions and not be afraid to share them. She taught me to respect myself. She taught me that it was okay to be gracious and yet still know when I had to walk away. Her name was Marie. She had a cat named Featherhead J. Negro. And she was witty and funny. She had a degree in coding back when it was still called coding, and when it was still called programming. And she was also at once the most hopeful and the most bitter person maybe I've ever known. She was most hopeful because she had done everything right, and she was certain that it was only a matter of time before the world saw and valued her for all she had to offer, and for something besides her bigness and her blackness and her womanness. She'd gotten out of the hood, she'd gotten her degree, she'd carved out a life, she'd learned a valuable skill. But she was also bitter because, true to Claire Kane Miller's article, no one ever hired her for her brains. As her life unfolded, she was not ever hired for one tech job ever. And I know it's saying, we all say, well, it's just a matter of trying, but it isn't. Because at some point, your experience just begets other experience. And when we see the Maries of the world, do we really see them in all their faults and their gifts? Or do we just see the perceptions that maybe 10 million other people's clicks have filtered for us? I lost touch with her. I couldn't find her. She didn't have a computer in the end. She didn't have Facebook access. I would search for her every month in vain. And when I finally found her, it was her obituary. But I'm not here to tell you to pity her. I'm here to tell you that you all missed out by not knowing her, by not employing her. So this is where I leave you. It's code, it's algorithms, it's clicks. It doesn't seem like it's harmful, but they have real consequences. Just as our algorithms conscribed Mari's life, they conscribed yours because they kept her out of it. And you lost the chance to know her as a person, to honor her as a woman, to laugh with her as a friend. Her skills would have been amazingly valuable at any tech company, and maybe even the difference between one of the few that succeeded in the early days and the millions that failed. But they'll never know. You'll never know. So I want to tell you to become your own algorithms. Sounds cute, right? But I mean it. When you're tempted to click, ask yourself if your reaction is based on something you know from your own personal experience or on an impression that an algorithm chose for you. If you have a weird little flutter because you see someone different, ask yourself, is that the wind? Is that something I actually know to be true? Check your isms. I mean, I called this Don't Feed the Racist, but it's every ism. It's everything that once you pile on, it becomes more until you don't know and can't find the truth anymore. Make a conscious effort to look. And in fact, the last part of becoming your own algorithms is when you're looking around and you see the people next to you or in your everyday life or on the street, if you get a sense of anxiety, again, ask yourself, is that real? And if it's not, go and create a real experience. Meet them. They might end up being the best friend you ever had, right? And if you do that, if you create your own experiences, if you ignore all the weird filters and all the images that you might have seen on the internet or things that you think might be true that probably aren't, you might find all the Maris that are still out there. So I hope you do. You'll be better for it. I am. And yeah, we might just fix the world.